Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review, and it's Women's History Month, and I'm here today to talk to you about the Philippa Gregory novel series, The White Queen, The White Princess, and The Spanish Queen, a series that ran from 2013 all the way to 2020. And before I go any further, yes, I know it's not Women's History Month. That was about a month ago or so. But I just now finished this entire series. So I'm late to the game and I wanted to talk about it. So this series, this is a very unique and interesting series that has to deal with the royal family of England, the whole Yorks versus the Lancasters, the Tudors, the Nevilles, and the Spanish Queen herself, the War of Roses, all this stuff I've never, ever heard of before. Because, I'm an American, so they don't teach us this stuff. I mean, I've heard of Henry VIII, but the only thing I knew about him is that he was a large man, sometimes mean, and he had tons of wives. And then, of course, I've heard of Elizabeth I, but they don't talk about her in this series because she's not yet born. And I've heard of Mary, Queen of Scots, but of course she's not in this series either. And so when it comes to that of the royal English family and stuff like that, I never knew of the Yorks. I never knew of the Tudors. I never knew of the Lancasters. I never knew of any of these people and stuff. And as for the War of the Roses, man, when I say I've never heard of this, trust me, I have never heard of this stuff. And so it's quite fascinating. I've heard before back in the day, a lot of royal families from other countries would kill their brothers and their cousins and fathers and stuff like that just to get the head of the throne. And I never knew exactly who they was talking about. I knew some stuff went down in Russia because of the show The Great. And I know that Queen Elizabeth, had her cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, executed and stuff like that because she didn't want her to get the throne of England and stuff. And that's really about the gist of all I ever knew. But all this other stuff, my God, it is crazy and fascinating. And when it comes to these three series, when they say it's a man's world, boy, they are not kidding. You can be a princess. You can be a queen. And that don't mean a rat's behind in the eyes of a man. Because the things these princesses and queens went through in these series that they actually went through in real life was so sad and tragic, man. It's like they are queens, but they still get harassed by men, talked down by men. And of course, the king is the all ruler and everything. What he says goes. And a lot of these kings had mistresses and stuff, except for Henry VII. Despite that man being paranoid and everything, you gotta give that dude props for not cheating on his wife and everything. And but it's just so sad and tragic to see what all these queens go through. And you know what? I've said this a million times before, and I'm gonna say this again. I get everybody confused when watching these historical shows because there are so many Catherines, there are so many Marys, there are so many Charles, there are so many Henrys, there are so many Margarets. It's there's too many to keep up with. Everybody just getting Richards and stuff. Everybody just keeps naming each other after all these other people. And it's I can't keep track, man. And every time I hear the word Queen Catherine, I'm thinking of Catherine of France and everything. And now I'm thinking of Catherine of Russia. And now I'm thinking of Catherine of Spain and everything. And when I keep hearing the name Henry, it's just like, I'm not in Edward and Charles and all. I'm just like, man, I'm so confused. I'm so confused. It's easier when you watch it because, people look different and stuff. You know what I'm saying? And so that helps. But when I hear their name, like when I heard Princess Mary, and they're talking about she's going to marry Charles of France, I'm all like, wait, hold up. This can't be Mary, Queen of Scots, because she shouldn't even be born right now in this time period. So what the heck is going on? And then it turns out, oh, okay, it's Mary Tudor and everything. And she's gonna be like, marry King Louis and like, the Queen of like France and stuff like that. I'm just like, dude, I'm so confused. And when trying to look it up on Wikipedia, it's even harder because I'm just like, hey, which is which? So I have to go to the actor or actress like profile and see what they look like to determine who is who. Or I have to find one of the kings or queens and find out who their kids are to find out which one I'm like reading about and stuff. My God, it's so confusing. And so when it comes to this entire series, it's funny how I started watching it years ago. And I'm not quite sure when exactly I started, what year I started, because I came in late. And I saw a picture online that said the White Queen. I'm all like, what is a White Queen? Like, are they talking about like chess pieces, or is this like a made up show or what? And I saw a woman with blonde hair holding a sword in the wrong position because that blade will slice your hand. But anyway, she was holding the sword by the blade. I'm all like, oh, cool. Is this kind of like a Xena or like a Game of Thrones or like a Legend of the Secret type show? I'm like, awesome. Like, I love shows like that. I love historical shows. I love like people fighting with swords. I love like, warriors and all that. So I'm like, cool. So this must be like a fantasy type show and all this other stuff, right? And so I watched the first 2 episodes and I was bored to tears. I'm all like, what the heck am I watching? I'm all like, why is she holding a sword and she never uses it in the show? So many years ago, I gave up on the White Queen and I never thought to like rewatch it again. And so this one YouTuber is all like, oh, it's a great show and she loves it and blah, blah, blah. And I'm all like, well, good for you, but I ain't watching it. And so then a few years ago, maybe like 3 or something like that, I was looking up this one actress who was in the Chronicles of Narnia movies back in the 2000s and stuff. What's Georgie's last name? Georgie something with an H. Anyway, she played Meg Tudor and stuff in Spanish Princess. And so, God, what is her name? It's Georgie something. Georgie Hanley, that's it. Georgie Hanley. And I'm all like, man, I wonder what she's been up to because I haven't seen her in anything since those Chronicles of Narnia movies and stuff, right? And so I'm like, okay, I'll look up Georgie, see what she's been up to. And I saw that she's done like a few movies, a few TV shows and everything. And I saw she was in something called The Spanish Princess. I'm like, well, what is that? So I looked it up on YouTube and I found the clip of her like talking to like the Scottish Privy Council and stuff, not knowing what the heck's going on or anything like that. I'm all like, oh, okay, so this would be neat to watch. So I watched the first episode for free a couple of years back, but only the first episode was free on Roku TV. And so I'm all like, oh, okay, I have to get Stars to like watch this. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't want to pay for Stars. And not only that, but I see all the other shows. And so I started looking up online what this show is about. I'm like, hey, Spanish Princess, White Queen. And so they're all like connected. So I'm all like, maybe I should go back and watch like the White Queen and everything. But I didn't want to pay for Stars right then and there because there's nothing on Stars that I really wanted to watch. But then Like there were two, oh, there was like three movies on there that I wanted to watch, and the Serpent Queen I wanted to watch on there. So I'm all like, is the Serpent Queen gonna get a second season? Cause if so, I'll just wait and then get it then. But they had a really good sale on, and so I'm all like, I don't know if it's gonna get renewed or not. So I'm like, okay, I'll just do it for the Serpent Queen, and then I'll watch the other shows and movies and stuff like that. And so like. Turns out, yes, the Serpent Queen is going to get a second season, and it's going to come out in a couple of months, and I no longer have stars. They kept trying to get me to keep it, but I didn't want to pay. I'll just go around Thanksgiving time when they have like a sale on or something like that. But like, yeah. And so I'm all like, what should I watch? And I didn't know the order of the shows. When I saw The White Princess and The White Queen, I assumed that like the White Princess came first and the White Queen came second. You know, Princess Queen, both named Elizabeth. They didn't know they was mother and daughter. So I decided, okay, fine. I'll watch the Spanish Princess first, and I'll watch the first season. And Georgie's barely in the first season of The Spanish Princess. I'm like, crap, dude, I'm watching this show for like no stinking reason. And then she's in the second one a whole lot more. So, okay, I'm like, all right, fine, this is what I'll do. Since I looked online, I saw the order in which they came in, I was like, you know what? I think it'll be more fun to go backwards. So I decided to watch the first season of The Spanish Queen. And then I decided to watch The White Princess. And then I decided to watch The White Queen. Then follow it up with The Spanish Princess Season 2. And it was a whole lot more funner to go back in time than it was, like, you know, in a linear sense and stuff going forward. I mean, yeah, it makes more sense to go forward, but it was just fun going backwards because it's kind of like, okay, in The Spanish Princess, I see a older King Henry VII, and I see Elizabeth Woodville and everything. Then going back in time, you see a younger, older Elizabeth Woodville, and then of course Elizabeth York, and then, you know, back even further, you know, it's like, oh, okay, this is how this all happened. So it was a lot more interesting going backwards, I'll say. But yeah, it makes more sense if you go forward and stuff like that. And so one thing I've noticed, I'm just kind of like, wait, hold up, something don't make no sense here. If the White Queen and the White Princess supposed to be like back-to-back series that take place, you know, in like a short amount of time, why is everybody recast? And why does the castle look different from the two series? Well, there's a reason for that. See, the White Queen that came out in 2013 was a British television series, a BBC series. And they filmed in Belgium and everything. But the BBC only wanted it to be a miniseries. They didn't want a sequel because it didn't get quite the reception that they wanted. It was about lukewarm at most and everything. And so, next thing you know, what was it? 2006? No, 2017. They decided to make the sequel series and stuff, The White Princess. So they moved everything to Southwest England and everything, and they had a new castle, and that's where the setting was for the Spanish and the White Princess. And since then they decided to recast for the White Princess. One reason probably why they wanted to recast, because if they were to cast those same actors from the White Queen, they would not only have to pay them, of course, but they would have to pay the original showrunner for that of the White Queen and everything, and the people who wrote it and stuff like that. So that's probably why they recast. And so, like, Emma Frost, that's so weird, Emma Frost. I mean, come on, that's like an X-Men comic book character name from Marvel. But that's her real name. She wrote some episodes for the White Queen, but then she became the showrunner for the White Princess and the Spanish Queen and stuff. I mean, Spanish Princess. And so originally, I was going to talk about all these shows individually. I'm all like, you know what? I might as well combine the three. because they pretty much deal with the same type of stuff, you know what I'm saying? And, it's like a trilogy, and so, like, hey, why not? You know what I'm saying? So, like I said, this show is based on several novels and everything created by that of Philippa Gregory. Can't get my words out. And it's mostly based on the Cousin Wars and stuff. And so, like, she's a historian, but she has got her fair share of criticism because some historians have said that her depiction of what went on back in the day is pretty historically inaccurate and stuff, especially when she throws in witchcraft and sorcery and stuff like that. But not even so much just that, it's just other little things that her interpretation of stuff that other historians say is like, just completely like insane. Because like Margaret Buford, she is depicted as being a very evil woman in this entire trilogy and everything. And many historians say she wasn't like that at all. So it does make you wonder. And so, cause when it comes to historians and stuff, they base things on like journals and like scriptures and other things they find back in the olden days and stuff that might depict, and also they add their own little stuff. So you have to take it as you will, you know what I'm saying? And so, like, the entire series is based on at least 5 different books that I can think of and stuff. And so when it comes to the White Queen, this is based on the Kingmaker's daughter and the Red Princesses. I think something else. I can't remember what. But then when it comes to the White Princess, that's basically just based on a book called The White Princess. But the Spanish Princess is based on the Contestant Princess and also King's Curse. And so when it comes to all 3 of these series, they have been criticized for their historical inaccuracies. Philippa and even some of the actors have said that, look, history is boring, and so they kind of like jazzed it up for dramatic purposes and stuff. The most criticized out of all the series is the Spanish Princess. It has historical inaccuracies as well, but the people of Spain took extreme offense to this and say it's one of the worst shows like ever. I look at it like this. When I watch historical shows, I would love if they would keep straight the history and stop changing things I want to learn. But after all these historical shows that I watch, because they are adaptions, like Rain is very historically inaccurate, but I still enjoy that show a lot. And it's still to today my favorite historical royal show of all time. So it's just kind of like, that's just what you're going to get. You're going to get historical inaccuracies because these are people telling their own story. And when it comes to history, not everybody's right. You really truly don't know what truly really happened unless you were there. Like, say, King Henry VII. It's been known that he's never had a mistress. But how do people truly 100% know that? You know what I'm saying? And so, like, that's just how I take it. Now, all of these series have had favorable or, like, pretty good reviews and stuff. The first one, it was people found it a little bland at times, but they found it enjoyable. And the White Princess had high praise, and the Spanish Princess, well, depending on where you are. In the West, people loved it. Like America, when I say like the West, like people in America like loved it, but of course people in Spain did not. But what's really crazy is that they say the Spanish Princess is extremely historically inaccurate. But, when I researched these characters online to see if what happened in the show actually happened in real life, a lot, and I do mean a lot, of what happened in the show actually happened in real life. So I don't know why people are so up in arms about that. Now, they did tweak some things that was kind of like different. That way it was inaccurate. But for the most part, a lot of this stuff did happen. Like, take Meg Tudor and everything. She really did fire on her husband with cannonballs and stuff. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, when I saw that in the show, I'm all like, okay, that must be something made up for the show. But no, she really did fire cannonballs at the dude. She didn't kill him, but she killed 4 innocent people by mistake. Then, Queen Catherine of Aragon, she really did lead a army, the English army, to fight Scotland and everything. But she did not lead them herself. Like, she didn't fight in the battle. She stayed home. In the show, it's shown that, like, she went over there with body armor while she was pregnant, which was so weird. But it was interesting. But it was weird. And she actually went over there on a horse, and she tried to fight this one man, but couldn't. But then she stabbed this one dude in the head with her sword and killed him. That's all fake, because she never actually went on the battlefield. But she was regent while King Henry VIII was over in France. And she did, like, construct an army to go fight, like, the Scottish people and stuff. And when they killed King James, she did present her husband with his coat and everything. That actually happened, just like it happened in the show. Now, as for farmers, men, and women fighting in that war, probably not, because women were not allowed to fight, back in those days, unless you was in Gaul. The women of Gaul, yeah, they was tough. They knew how to fight. They knew how to defend themselves and stuff. And also, there was another battle, I think, from the White Queen. It was supposed to happen on a battlefield, but instead it happened in, like, the woods or something like that. And so that was inaccurate and stuff. But for the most part, like I said before, a lot, and I do mean a lot of stuff that happened. And, like, all 3 of these shows actually happened, especially the Spanish Princess. And so, like, yeah, there are historical inaccuracies here and there, but it's pretty solid for the most part. Now, like, take the Spanish Princess. There's a black woman named Lena, and she is Catherine's lady in waiting. Here's the thing about her. She's based on 2 completely different characters of the same name. She is based on Catalina. 2 completely Catalinas. One is Spanish, who was a lady in waiting, and the other one was a black slave that accompanied what's her name? Catherine and stuff. So they decided to combine these 2 and cast a black actress and stuff. And her real name is Catalina on the show, but they just call her Lena. And so I wish they would have separated the 2, because there's a girl named Rosa that they didn't really do much with. She was just a made up character just to add dramatic purposes. But they could have called her the other Catalina or something like that, So I don't know why they didn't do that. That was just kind of odd and weird. Also, yes, Spain did have black slaves, and Catherine did bring at least one that I know, at least a couple black slaves with her when she went to England. One was he was like a trombone player, a trumpet player, something like that. Over in Scotland, we see there were black people over there, and yes, while Meg Tudor was over there, yes, there were black folks over there and stuff like that. And so a lot of people don't assume that, because this stuff is never ever told and stuff. And it's mostly never shown in television. But of course, when you watch it in television today, you see all kind of races in historical shows that either should be there or should not be there and stuff. and it's confusing. So when I saw that, I'm just like, were there really black people there, or did they just add that for, diverse purposes? But no, there really was black folks back in those days and stuff. I will say, with all these series, the White Queen being 10 episodes, White Princess being 8, and the Spanish Princess being 16 cut into 8, because it was supposed to be a 16 miniseries, but they decided to cut it in half and give it 2 seasons. It's the only one to have like 2 seasons. I will say, at times, yes, the writing is kind of bland, and it does get kind of boring after a while. And but it does like really jazz itself up towards like the middle and stuff like that. The drama, the affairs, the war, the scheming, the underhandedness, all that stuff is written very well, and it will keep you entertained for the for like when you watch this series. The acting is very good as well. Everybody is like solid, and everybody feels very believable and stuff. Even the people who played the same characters that are recast do a very good job. There are slight differences and stuff like that in the acting portrayals, like not Mary, but Elizabeth York. Like, both those two actresses act like completely different, and their personalities are different and stuff. I don't know why they decided to change it. Cecily York, like, she's just different in the White Queen and White Princess and stuff. I'm not just talking about different as in the actress, but just different portrayals and everything. Like, one is nicer in the White Queen, where in the White Princess, she's more like arrogant and selfish and stuff, which they don't really talk much about her. When she disappears in the show, oh, she disappears and stuff. Now, there's some people who I wish they would, like, would have explained what happens to them when the series ended. Because it's quite fascinating, like Cecily of York and everything. Like, when she leaves the show, I'm just like, dude, what the heck happened to her? So you have to, like, look it up online. Also, what was it? King Edward West Winchester or something like that. Like his mom. Like, I was like, what happened to her after she got like arrested? Well, it turns out that like she was, confined in the castle and everything. Her brother had to like, pay her ransom, and then when she returned back home and everything, basically her life sucked. Her brother made her live a poor lifestyle with no riches of any kind, and she died of poverty and everything. And she was once like, a queen's mother and everything. And I really wish they would have explained what happened to her after that. I also wish they would like do a follow-up on this show to show like, what happened after all said and done. Like, because one interesting thing that a lot of people have pointed out is like King Henry VIII, like they were so happy to see the portrayal of Catherine of Aragon and stuff, because they say in normal like history type shows, you never see her. They always talk about Anne Boleyn, I think her name is, and Mary Boleyn and all these and Anne Hastings, and they always talk about all his mistresses and all the other women that he married, but they never talk about Catherine. And so that was nice to see, the fact that he actually did, not my camera over, that he actually did love her and everything. And like, and of course their marriage deteriorated towards the end when she couldn't give him no more male heirs that would survive childbirth. And then he started cheating on her and all this other stuff, And it's so like sad and tragic, like I said, what happened to all these queens, because the only queen to actually have a pretty happy ending is Elizabeth of York. Elizabeth of like Woodsville and Catherine and stuff. Like, honest to God, man, it's like their lives ended so tragically and stuff, and all the crap they had to go through. And I felt extremely bad for like Catherine and everything, because she did love her husband and she was the true queen of England. And even like, the common people and stuff really like looked up to her and stuff because she was a good queen. And it's sad that what Henry VIII did to her and stuff when he got pissed about like, because just like in the show, he wondered if she slept with his brother Arthur and everything, the original king in waiting. And Prince Arthur, I guess you would say, the original, he was supposed to be king, but then he died soon after getting married and stuff. And so, just like in history, they wondered, like, hey, did she do it with him or not? And she kept saying, no, I didn't do it. But, we saw in the show what happened and stuff. And then she wouldn't give him no male heirs and everything. And because they had about 6 kids, but only one survived, I think. And so, like, he just later just like cheated on her, and then he got Charles, and then he wanted to make Charles like the future king, even though he was illegitimate and everything. And like, the Pope and all them weren't like happy and all that crap. So Charles had to become, I think, like a knight or something like that, or like he became something, I forgot what. And then of course that's when we got Mary Tudor as queen, who is Bloody Mary and everything. And like, then of course down the line came Elizabeth I, and then the line of the Tudors ended with Queen Elizabeth because she didn't want to get married and she didn't want to have kids and stuff. I am curious as to know why. She said she was married to the people and to the land of England. But it's kind of like, dude, why was she so adamant on staying queen and getting rid of her cousin if she didn't want to carry on the line of succession and everything? I don't understand that. But these ain't my people and stuff. But I've already said, people of Europe, yeah, there are international cousins and everything. Because so much stuff that has happened around the world is a result of England. The original, well, not the original, I guess the second country to try to like take over the world and everything. Because what they would do is they will have like their princesses and princes marry into other countries of their princesses and princes to strengthen like the line, and of course take over, and like then they later like came to like America, and then they like the whole Australia and New Zealand thing, and like in the Middle East and India and stuff like that, and Africa, and it's just like, dude, chill. And something so cool I also learned about this was the 2 princes in the castle of like what is the Tower of London, because I talked about this before when talking about Goosebumps, the anthology series, the teen kid like horror series by R.L. Stine. Night in the Tower, or Nightmare Tower, whatever it's called, is based on like the 2 princes in the tower. And I remember reading about that, but not really paying too much attention when I read it. And then I actually got to see it like in the show, which was really neat. So I'll get into each show individually in a while. But like when it comes to which is probably my favorite, honestly, I can't decide. Like I really can't. Because I find them all like somewhat equal in everything. But I don't know, it's like, if I had to pick, which was probably my favorite series, like I said, it's hard. I just don't know, because I like these shows, but I also find them a bit bland at times. I know the Spanish Princess season 2 was really engaging. I know the second half of like the White Queen is very engaging. The first half kind of just bored me to tears a little bit. The Spanish Princess is very good as well, but it was just weird seeing all this like sorcery and stuff like that, which thankfully they got rid of sorcery in the Spanish Princess. and stuff. That just didn't make no sense. But they always do that in these historical shows. Like, if somebody was rumored to, like, have magical powers, they depict that in like these drama shows just to add more drama to it. Also, one thing I found interesting about, like, this show is that a lot of this show, like a lot of the stuff that happened to these people back in the day was rumor. Like, there's just some things people just don't know. Like, was Elizabeth of York really involved with her uncle, King Edward and stuff? Did they really have were they really in love with each other? And nobody really knows. It's always been rumored. So the show takes it upon itself to be all like, hey, they actually did. Same thing with Richard of York. Because he they were like, is he alive? Was he not? Like, is this dude an imposter? And so what they did, since it was clarified back in the day that this was an imposter, so they did show that angle of the show. But then the show kind of wants you to believe that, hey, this really is like, Richard and everything. So they always do that. So whenever something's based on rumor, they like to depict every aspect of like the rumor and stuff like that. And, and I find that interesting, but also a bit confusing. I just kind of wish they would pick one narrative and just stick with that. When it comes to all these rumors, like take the Great, Queen, I can't say her name, Queen Catherine. Okay, I said it now. It was rumored that she did a horse. And so what the show decided to do was have her not do a horse, thankfully, because it was just rumor back in the day. It was just people gossiping and making stuff up because they didn't like her. And so that's how it was depicted in the show. It was people who did not like her and said, oh yeah, she did this when she actually didn't. So they kept bringing that up over and over in the show and stuff like that. And I wish that's how they would have done like this show. Is this my favorite historical show? Like I said, no. I still prefer Reign, but I also love the fact that they didn't go the comedic route like the Great or the Serpent Queen. That really bugs me when they do that in these historical shows. Yeah, it's funny and yeah, it's different, but it takes you out of the mood, you know what I'm saying, when they keep adding all that humor and stuff. So I'm glad this was a straightforward drama. But I will say, in season 2 of The Spanish Princess, Mary Tudor. Oh my God. Her and King Louis, because he's much older than her and stuff. She was hoping to say, since he's big and he's old, maybe he'll die of a heart attack. So she wouldn't let him touch her. And so she kept running around the bedroom and he kept chasing her. And then it looked like he was dead and she was happy until she saw him move. She's like, oh man. And then she kept doing him over and over and over and over, hoping he would have a heart attack, until eventually at some point he finally did. I'm okay with that humor. Like, that was actually written very well. But hey, let's get into these shows, you know what I'm saying? So, The White Queen, the very first show, came out in 2013. It was filmed in Belgium and stuff. And it has that of Rebecca Ferguson playing that of Elizabeth Woodsville. And she would go on to marry the king. So this has to do with the War of the Roses and the War of the Cousins and stuff. Very fascinating, very interesting. 3 brothers of York fighting it out for like who can be king and stuff. And a lot of people had their finger as to who gets to be king. You know, they manipulated stuff behind the scenes. Richard Neville, He was the kingmaker. He was a noble who wanted his daughters, Isabel and Anne, to marry that of George and that, or Prince George and Prince Edward and stuff. And, you know, of course, the reason for all this happening, because, like, here's the thing. The Yorks and the Lancasters, I don't know who is truly the rightful ruling family in everything. Because so much sneaky stuff was happening back in the day, and then, you know, there were people dying, and then, crap, dude, who is the dude who played, okay, Max, Irons, who played King, is it Edward? Where would that say? Richard Edward? Okay, King Edward. Oh wait, crap, I think I'm getting my kings messed up. Okay, I know George is one, and Richard the Third. Okay, Richard the Third was the king, and then George is the one who committed treason and got drowned in wine, I think it was. I remember hearing something about that a long time ago. But yeah, Edward, played by Max Irons and stuff. So King Edward married that of Elizabeth in secret and stuff like that, which caused a big uproar and everything. Now, one thing that's odd is that they depict Elizabeth Woodsville as a commoner and everything, and she wasn't in real life. And I thought that really odd when I was watching the show. I'm just kind of like, why would he marry her? I gotta get it for love and for love first sight and all this other stuff, but it was just kind of like, you know, that just didn't make no sense, because they don't do things like that back then. They weren't allowed to marry for love, even though some did, and they got in trouble for it. But when you're that royal bloodline, you gotta marry whoever the king tells you to marry and stuff. And so, like, she became queen, and people did not like that. They did not like her. And the thing I like about these series, like I said before, is all the strong women in here that was princesses and queens. Very strong, very good acting. Like, the acting in these shows is very, very well done. And so, like, you know, as her husband's going off to war, and, like, you know, her husband is cheating on her with all these mistresses and crap like that, she had to stay behind. But sadly, twice, she had to flee for her life with her family to go to the Abbey and everything. One of the first times is when her kids were young, and the second time is when they were much older, as like teenagers and stuff. Because, you know, people were trying to take the crown, and they wanted to kill, like, you know, her male heirs and everything. And so she had to literally flee to the Abbey. And it was so sad and depressing to see a queen have to do that and everything, you know. All because their uncles wanted the throne. And the thing I find so odd about this show is that both her and her mother and daughter are witches in this show. And when they do their witchcraft, it's in the oddest, strangest way. It was just like the first time, they was looking for somebody on like a boat, and Isabel, well, the Nevilles were on the boat, and so all of a sudden she just starts blowing wind out her mouth, and then her mother, who is the grandmother, and just kind of like, whatever, I'll join in too. And then she started blowing, though she didn't want to. And then Lizzie York started blowing as well. And I'm just kind of like, what the world? And the thing I find about the White Queen is that it's very fast paced. But I do appreciate it will tell you what year you're in, so you don't get too confused. The other two series don't do that. So when you're watching the other series, you're like, okay, here's a kid. I'm like, hold up. Now they're a teenager? When that happened? And so I do appreciate it. They will at least tell you what year you're in, so you don't get too confused. Now, even though it's called the White Queen, like, the thing that's confusing is that Elizabeth Woodsville is kind of barely in the show, and it doesn't really follow her story. It mostly follows the other two brothers of York and the Nevilles and stuff. And I'm just kind of like, why is it called the White Queen based on her if it's mostly revolving around all the other people? Because when the other people started showing up, like the Neville sisters and stuff, I'm like, why is there so much focus on them? See, I didn't know who they were at that time. And so, like, while Edward was like, off in war and doing his thing, she was busy, like, trying to keep the fort down in the castle, and then also having to flee and everything like that. Because the show mostly revolves around, well, first let's get into the Neville. So Richard Neville, who was like, a nobleman and everything, he wanted his daughters to be queen. So he sought an alliance with that of Richard and that of George to overthrow Edward and everything. And so he had both his daughters marry them. And, you see a lot in here. George is depicted as wanting to always kill his brother Edward and stuff. But anyways, George never got to be king. And with all the conspiracies and plotting that he did and stuff like that, Isabel never was able to be queen. And they had a child, but it died at sea and everything while they was on the boat. And so, like, Isabel later on died. And her, I believe, daughter is, of course, Maggie Pole and everything. And Maggie Pole had a very, very big hand in, like, the War of the Roses. And when she got, like, older as a teen and an adult. And so, like, and got executed as well and stuff like that. And so, like, whatchamacallem? So, like, George eventually, after committing so much treason and stuff, like, he was put to death by his brother. His mother begged. Now, I gotta say, when these women cry on the show, they give a performance. They deserve their roses. You can feel that empathy through the screen and everything. These are some good actors and actresses. And so, like, he got drowned in wine. I forget, it starts with an M. I forget what it's called. Because you get to pick which way you want to die. And he picked drowning by wine and everything. And it was a very unique way of being executed. And so, like, eventually, as, like, Lizzie York and everything started to get older, her father died. So the king died, and now there's a problem. Elizabeth Woodsville, and people sought to take the throne from that of Richard and I think Charles, I think the name was, of her two sons and everything. Because it's all about the sons. Their kings rule, plain and simple as that, back in those days. And they didn't want the women to rule unless there was only a female heir. And so, like, she feared, at least this is how it's depicted in the show, she feared that, like, they would come and kill her kids or put them in the tower. So she had Richard sent off and everything, but they weren't able to do it to the other son, the other prince. And so the one prince was in the tower. I think it was Charles, I believe his name was. And because so many people got put in the Tower of London, man, and so many people died there too. Funny how it's a tourist attraction now. But anyway, so, like, was it Charles or was it Edward? Heck, I don't know. Whatever her son's name was. So he's in the tower. And Richard got sent off and everything. And then King Richard took over. Now, Richard kept flip-flopping along with, like, earlier, like, first he was with the Lancasters, then he was with the Yorks and the Neville, stuff like that. But then eventually, I'd assume him and Anne would be, like, good fit for, like, the crown. But in the show, he starts to become paranoid and stuff, and start to doubt, like, those conspiring against him. And Anne What's interesting about her, getting her a little bit later. What's interesting about Anne is that, like, um, she was always depicted as more of like, the outgoing one, the one who wishes to be queen, as Isabel was depicted in the show as being nervous and timid and stuff like that. And so Richard, of course, he kept like he was supposed to take over as king until his sons became of age. And but he decided to go against that and everything with help of like Anne in the show because she wanted to be queen and everything and she wasn't gonna let nothing stop her. And so like whatchamacallit, they didn't stay king and queen for too long. I forget who died first, but basically it caused that of like Elizabeth to flee back to the Abbey, and Elizabeth of York became very defiant. Now, it was rumored that Anne in this series really surprised me because I wasn't expecting her to have the biggest role that she did. Like, when it comes to Anne, she, like I said before, she was like a little bit more outgoing and stuff like that. But then, of course, she had to marry, I think, the Prince of France or something like that, Edward of Westminster. And so, like, as the war kept going on, they had to flee. And then, like, all said was done, they get captured and stuff like that. And Edward's mother, like I said before, was later in prison and then lived a life of poverty and stuff like that. But then Anne, man, Anne was wise and smart. She realized, hey, look, thing between like, she likes like, Richard and stuff like that, and they should marry. She became queen, had some heirs and stuff like that. She was really surprising in her turn as like queen because she started to, because it's funny because once these like women realized, hey, I want to stay on the throne and I want my family to stay there, they would do whatever it takes and everything like that. And but like I said before, it was short lived. I think they only ruled for like 3 years until like he died or something like that. And as for like, the whole prince thing, the whole prince in the tower thing is one of the biggest mysteries of all time. Because the simple fact that in real life, both princes were there, and then people don't know what the world happened to them. They don't know if they escaped on their own through like a secret passage. They don't know if one of the people who lived in the castle helped them escape. They don't know if they was murdered, and if they were murdered, who had them murdered. Was it Margaret? Was it Richard? Was it somebody else? Like, people don't know, and they never found a body. Or did they just escape and live their lives as like normal people and stuff? Like, people literally have no idea, and it's one of the greatest mysteries of all time. And the show plays on that when Richard goes to inspect on them and they're not there. But we see a person go to like get them, and we assume they're gonna kill them. Now in the show, Elizabeth had a decoy, Richard, and everything in the tower, a boy who resembled him. And then towards the end, we see that he returned to her and stuff. So let's get into the Lancasters and slash Tudors and stuff. Now there's another crucial component in the War of Roses, the red and white roses and stuff. And the red roses of that belong to the Tudor family, I believe. Because I remember in A White Princess, he didn't want no more white roses in the castle and stuff. Anyway, that is Margaret Buford, played by Amanda Hale. And this version of Margaret is very different from the other two in the other series. This one, while conniving, yes, she's not depicted as this evil tyrant of a woman and everything. This one is just more sneaky behind the scenes. She plays a crucial role because she wants her son, Henry, to be on the throne. See, I believe from what I read, she was a queen. I forget her husband's name, but then he died. And so it was supposed to go to that of Henry, I believe. And something, like I said before, what's his name, married in secret in New York, wanted to take like the throne and stuff like that. So like she always just wanted her son to rule, and these women back in the day would do whatever the world it took. And so like she basically planned like a coup that like failed, and then like she tried again, and then she even was one of like served that of Elizabeth Woodsville and stuff. She had to suck up her pride and do that in the show. And so with all the gossip and stuff she was hearing, she was planting seeds here and there. And while her son was exiled in training to be king and building an army along with his uncle Jasper and stuff, a person who she seems to be like in love with, even though she was married. And so like one of the things I always find interesting about all these kids that are estranged from their parents, they really don't want nothing to do with them, but then eventually they do in these series and stuff. And so when the time came and everything, Richard the Third, I believe, was killed in battle, and led by that of like Prince Henry. And then Prince Henry later took the crown. When it comes to, like I said before, this depiction of like Margaret in a dramatic sense, it's kind of bland, kind of boring. She does a good job, don't get me wrong. It's just the other two, the ones that are more evil, are more for like a soap opera, more dramatic type thing. But a lot of people really do take offense with the other two Margarets and how evil she is portrayed. So this one, like I said before, is more fair and everything. It is less evil, but just very conniving. And it's weird. This woman didn't do all that scheming back in the day. Henry would never have became king. Now, The White Princess that came out in 2017 was filmed in Southwest England, I believe in Bristol, I believe. They had a different landscape, a different castle. That's why everything looks just so different. And so this depicts King Henry VII taking the throne. And it's been advised he needs to get rid of all the other male heirs that could like take over the crown. And so because of that, like he forces his guards to go to the house of Elizabeth Woodsville, and there she causes Richard to like hide right in the cupboard and told him don't come out until like it's safe. And so the guards, they went there, they like went through the house. I think they might have, I don't think they burnt it, but like they went through and they could not find him, so they assumed he was dead. And so who he wants Elizabeth of York, basically to make the people of England happy and everything. He figured, hey, we can strengthen our like families. The Tudors in New York should marry and form an heir, and then we can rule together. That way we can put an end to the whole War of Roses and stuff like that. And against her will, she married him and stuff. And they depict in the show that they was arguing about something, and she's all like, just take it and everything. And so he assaults her and everything. I have no idea if that happened in real life. I wasn't there. And so like, it's just weird that they would have that scene in there because it was very disturbing. But she did in fact get pregnant. And so this show depicts both the Elizabeths like opposing that of the Tudors. The Tudors hate the Yorks and the Yorks hate the Tudors. But Margaret Buford hates the Yorks even more. In this version, she is depicted as spiteful, evil, nasty, just despicable, but very religious and stuff. But it's weird because in real life they say Elizabeth of York and Margaret actually got along very well. And so, like, I was very shocked to see this portrayal, this depiction of King Henry VII, because when he was in The Spanish Princess as a much older man, he was a whole lot nicer. This version is extremely paranoid and everything, like he was in real life, and pretty arrogant and stuff. He always assumed everybody was laughing at him or felt that he wasn't fit to be king and like this and that. But the biggest thing in this series is when it comes to that of Maggie Pole and that of her brother Teddy and everything. Teddy is basically legitimate and he could be on the throne if need be. So he locked him away in the tower and stuff where he spent all of his life living. In the show, Teddy is depicted as going mad. This pisses off Maggie Poole. More on her a little bit later. And so it is interesting when it comes to Elizabeth of York because she opposed, like I said, Henry. But then after a while, she started to love him, especially after they started having children and stuff. We see a turn in Elizabeth of York where she starts opposing her mom because her mom is starting to commit treason and stuff. And Elizabeth is starting to be all like, yo, I'm the queen. I can do this. I can do that. And I can't have my mom take it away from me by trying to stage some type of like rebellion or a coup or something like that, along with that her cousin Maggie and stuff. So she starts to turn on her mom, which is like really, really sad and stuff. Now, Jodie Corner, she plays Lizzie York, and she does a very phenomenal job of playing Lizzie and stuff. Her mother, of course, like I said before, got recast. And so now Elizabeth Woodsville, this Elizabeth is very cunning. One thing I've noticed about both the Elizabeths in this series is they're very strong-willed and very, very cunning. Like Elizabeth Woodsville, basically, even when she's locked in like a room and stuff like that, she's able to find a way to communicate with the outside world, keeping like, tearing off like part of her dress and using parts of her blood and something in her necklace to like write a letter. But once again, witchcraft is shown in this show. This witchcraft is shown differently than in the other. And the other one, it just kind of like randomly happens in a very peculiar kind of way. It just like happens. Like if somebody will say something, the other people in the room be quiet, and all of a sudden they just start doing like witchcraft, and it's just kind of weird. And this one, she always makes things happen with like her hands and her words, and it's very subtle but very powerful at the same time. It's like she's monologuing to herself, and then she makes things happen. Still weird that they involve sorcery in this. And I believe in the books there were like shapeshifters and changelings, and this is all kind of weird things for like more of a fantasy element. But basically, the relationship between the two Elizabeth became extremely strained. And when Elizabeth of Woodsville kept trying to commit treason in the eyes of the king, she was later banished and everything. Then brought back to court only to be banished again. And then when her health started to deteriorate. And, eventually she died and stuff, which was really sad because, when you're watching White Queen, who doesn't love her, you know what I'm saying? Because she went through a lot, having to flee to the Abbey like so many times and stuff. And so like Lizzie eventually starts to mourn her mother and feel bad. Cecily, on this other hand, like I said, she's depicted two completely different ways in both series, and she just completely disappears in this show. Now, as for Margaret Buford and stuff, like I said before, she's depicted as evil, so evil that she murders Jasper and stuff because people started to not side with Henry no more and started to side with the imposters of Richard and stuff. And so like her acting is still good, like I said before, this new actress and stuff. But it is weird how evil, and I mean just spiteful evil, she is portrayed in this show. Even so much as to commit murder and stuff. Now, as for Maggie Pole, who is also named Margaret, it's weird. Margaret, Maggie, but then Meg in the Spanish Queen. I don't know where Meg comes from, but anyway. Maggie Pole has a very interesting, foot in the War of Roses and stuff. She is pissed off basically that her brother Teddy is in the tower. And, she constantly is trying to get him out by help of the queen and the king, but they just won't do it. And something happens. God, I forgot what. Something causes her to commit treason along with the other people who try to take the crown, but they fail. But she was spared and everything. And when she was spared, it wouldn't be the first time she would do something like that. But anyway, it won't be the last, I guess you could say. And so this version of Maggie is very timid, very shy, and she's forced to marry a man who's much older than her. Now, in this show, her husband, Richard Pole, it's weird because he has his arm is in a sling. Something happened at childbirth that caused his arm to be disabled. But then yet in the Spanish Queen, not only does he look younger, his arm is totally okay. So I don't get that. And so she is tasked with, I think, going to France, I believe, to see if Richard is really who he says he is or an imposter. Because there's been 2 imposters. I forget who those ladies are in France, but they're related to them somehow. And they want to take over the crown and stuff. So they started getting imposter Richards and stuff. And so she had to go over there, but she's all like, look, man, I barely know Richard and stuff. Like, how I'm supposed to tell if this is him and everything? And so when it comes to Richard, first in the show, they got a little boy to form an army and fight like King Henry. But the boy pretty much just caved and all like, look, man, I'm an imposter. And so Henry, the thing about Henry is that even though this Henry is mean and he's paranoid, he will have mercy on people. He just won't outright execute people. He will force them to work for him and stuff and be servants and embarrass them and everything. But you do see him go mad when the other Richard comes around. And so that's something I find very interesting, because he could have executed so many of these people who tried to take his crown, but he spared Maggie, he spared both the Richards and stuff. Now he did execute some people, yes, and stuff like that, but you know what I mean. And so there's another Richard imposter. This one is Perkins Warbeck. And he is actually from real life and everything. He impersonated Richard as a much older Richard. Now, in the show, it is confusing. It's been confirmed that he is Perkins. But the show also wants you to believe that he could really be Richard. And so when he failed to take the crown, he was made to be a servant boy. And he married a woman, I think, named Catherine. They had a kid. And so, of course, it's illegitimate and stuff. And Margaret went to go over there and get her and everything. But I think, what was it? In real life, once again, Henry had mercy and everything. And, allow her, I believe, to live in court and probably be one of the women in waiting or something like that. But when it comes to that of Richard, I don't know if this is an imposter or the real one in the show, because like I said before, the one who hid in the cupboard, nobody knows what the world happened to him and stuff. And so Lizzie finally admitted to her husband, yeah, my mom hid him and blah, 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 and stuff like that. Which of course we saw in The White Queen, and he came back towards the end. And so even as a prisoner, this dude is so adamant that, look, I am in fact the real Richard and everything. And even when they tell, look, dude, we'll spare your life, we'll spare your wife and kids' life, all you got to do is just say you're an imposter, this and that. But he would not do that. And so in real life, he was only executed because he tried to escape in real life. And when they executed him, they executed Teddy as well. Here in the show, Elizabeth, Lizzie, is contemplating, is this really her brother or not? She has no idea. So she tries to help him escape by setting a fire. He is later caught and says he is the rightful heir to like the throne and this and that. So Henry has no choice, and he has both him and Teddy executed, because now is at the point where he's getting tired of people trying to take his crown. This, of course, pisses off Maggie even more and stuff, because her brother, who she's been fighting for to get like freed, is now dead. The Spanish princess, the one that has a lot of controversy in Spain. So this came out in 2019 and lasted 2020, and it's the longest of the entire trilogy, lasting for 16 episodes. Charlotte Hope plays that of Catherine of Aragon, the Queen of England, when she marries Prince Harry, later on King Henry VIII. And so with this one, the first season, I felt kind of boring a little bit, only because I got tired of hearing Catherine always talking about, oh, I need somebody to pay my dowry and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And she was trying to like, you know, constantly trying to do that. Now, here's the thing. Her mother, Isabel, like, you know, sent her on over to England to marry, to strengthen the lines and this and that. Now, it is true that she married Arthur and everything, but Arthur died soon after being married. I tell you, people back then were dropping left and right. People really only lived, a lot of them only lived in their 20s, their 40s, or 60s and stuff. They kept dying of diseases, like the sweating disease and stuff. Catherine contracted the sweating disease, but she survived it and stuff. But a couple of others did not. And so in this series, when she's over there, she brings her court. Her court is looked down upon, and so are their beliefs and their language by that of Margaret Buford. This Margaret Buford is much, much, much older and a whole lot more evil and stuff and conniving. And so like she doesn't like the way they the Spanish mourn for people and all this and that. One thing I will say I appreciate about this series more than anything else are the accents. I don't care if they sound terrible. I appreciate that they actually have people trying to sound Spanish, Scottish, and French. One thing that bugs the snot rockets out of me is that every time I see a historical show that has to do with another country, like Russia or France or whatever, Scotland, they always have British accents. That drives me insane. So while the accents don't always sound great in this show, and I have no idea what Charlotte Hope is saying half the time, I at least appreciate that they tried and everything. Like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And so when she comes over with her court, I'll get to them individually a little bit later. And so basically the problem with her is that now that Arthur is died and she consummated their marriage, she's screwed because they have to pay their dowry. A dowry is kind of like, it's kind of like a tax almost. Like, because a princess or whatever, a lady in waiting has to get married, they have like a dowry that has to be paid off and all of that crap like that. And you know, and so she's desperately throughout the entire first season trying to get people to pay it. She tries to get King Henry VII to pay it. She tries to get her father to pay it. She tries to have her father marry her off to this person so she can get pay it off and stuff. That's all you see all throughout the first season. This actually happens in real life. She really was trying her best to get people to pay it off and stuff like that. Also, like in this series, King Henry VII, who's a lot more nicer, sadly, Queen Lizzie of York dies and everything, which causes him to mourn for many days in darkness while Margaret, what's her name? Buford takes over as regent. It causes that of like Catherine to get kicked out of like her the castle and stuff like that. Her and her court have to go live in town and all this other crap. And so she's desperately trying to get Harry to marry her. Now, in this show, it's depicted that him and her used to write each other and he would flirt with her while she was married to his brother. In real life, I have no idea. I've read that this never happened because of the age difference, but who really knows, you know what I'm saying? So in the show, it's depicted that he had a thing for Catherine, which is funny because her father calls her Catalina. And so, like, they want to get married, but the king will not allow it, even in the Pope will and stuff. Well, after a while, King Henry VII comes to, and he decides, you know what? I want to marry Catherine of Aragon. This actually happened in real life. He really wanted to marry her and stuff, despite the age difference. But it just didn't happen. And while away and everything, Harry was away doing something. And then once again, there is another coup attempt. Oh, Maggie Poole. So in this version, Maggie Poole has like a different husband. It's still Richard Pole, but like he's completely different looking. Like this is a much older depiction of all of them. He should be really old, but he's not. And his arm is completely fixed. Don't know how. He dies of like, you know, something falling on top of him. And her family becomes poor to the part of begging. This actually happened in real life where she was poor at one point. And she's constantly begging here and there. And Catherine, like, you know, helps her out and stuff. I forget what causes her to commit treason. I forget something happened. Somebody died that pissed her off again. And so she tries to commit treason. They failed, and Henry had her confined to the tower. When King Henry VII died and everything, Harry later renamed himself Henry, because that's his real name, but he went by Harry as a prince, but now he's King Henry VIII, takes over, and that pisses off his grandmother. And so he frees Maggie and all this other stuff. And his grandmother basically tries to do one last scheme where she tries to get members of the court like in prison and stuff like that, but it just doesn't work. And she dies crazy in bed. I don't know how she died in real life. But basically he marries that of Catherine and she becomes the queen. And so like, what was I thinking? Something else. Can't think of nothing else along that. But I will say this. The actress who plays Catherine and the actor who plays Henry VIII, they actually fell in love in real life and are still dating till this day. Now, Catalina / Lena. She is Catherine's lady-in-waiting, her best friend, and as a former slave. Like I said before, there are two Catalinas in real life. Normally, when you have like a queen or a princess, they name their ladies-in-waiting after them. Some of them do that. Mary did that. Mary Scott. And so, like, she always gives advice and wisdom to that of Catherine. Sometimes they butt heads, sometimes they don't. She eventually falls in love with a man named, I can't pronounce his name, Obedito or something like that. He was like a guard of like Catherine, and he helped save Lena's life, and then he later kept getting high ranking up as the series progressed. These two are really good characters. The problem is that, like, you know, they're put in storylines for dramatic purposes. I really wish they would have split up the two Catalinas and everything. However, by the second season, they had a big role in season one. But by season two, they're just there. Like, she has like three boys, two are twins, and he keeps getting high ranked up. At one point, Margaret Buford tried to have him executed and everything, only to prevent that. Now, he's a made-up character. But then in the second season, Lena is barely there. She pops in to give advice. She pops out. She pops back in to argue with that Catherine. She gets treated nasty by Catherine and stuff. And then when Catherine's about to no longer be queen, Catherine goes to her. And it's just like, why make them important characters in season one only to barely do anything with them in season two and just to have them there? Like, I don't get that. Rosa is completely made up. I don't see the point in having Rosa. They could have made her a Catalina. But anyways, basically, she sleeps with a married man who's like a part of the Privy Council and stuff. He doesn't want her. She gets pregnant. She is about to have an abortion, but then decided not to, and then she goes back home to Spain in season one, and that's literally it. She shows back up in season two for like one episode to tell Lena, hey, why don't you come be with me and everything? I married a good man and a high-ranking job, and your husband have a high-ranking job and this and that. But Lena's all like, she can't leave Catherine. Well, her husband took the job anyway and forced them to leave. And I'm just kind of like, what's the point of this character? Now, Margaret Tudor / Meg Tudor, she's barely in season one. Basically, they want her to marry this old dude in Scotland who's King James. She doesn't want to, but she's forced to. And then she disappears. By season two, we see the Privy Council in Scotland does not like her. They treat her like crap. And she always tells King James, played by Ray Stevenson, may he rest in peace. Yo, man, they talking about your wife. Like, do something about that. Anyways, after he dies in battle and stuff, her son, who's only a couple of months old, becomes king. That becomes a huge problem. That happened in real life. The dude was literally made king at like 7 months, but since he's not of age, she took over as regent. And well, let's just say that the Privy Council of Men did not like that. They didn't want this English woman telling them what to do and this and that. And so she had a couple of kids, but they all died except for one. In the show, there are two that are left. One is supposed to die, but they decided to let that one live in the show. And so Jamie is the one that lives in real life and in the show and is the future king. So basically, she is forced to flee back to England and everything. And what is it? Some guy, I forget his name, he decides he's going to let his brother rule and stuff like that. So it's really sad and tragic to see her have to flee, because I'm thinking to myself, how in the world is she going to rule against these men and they treat her like crap and everything, you know? And so eventually she goes back there. And she, no, wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. She was forced to flee twice. The first time, she fled with her children. The second time, she was unable to. Because she ended up marrying a man named Angus. And the Privy Council did not like this, because they say, look, along with you married the King James and everything, you said you would not remarry and this and that, and we will listen to what you say. Since you broke that promise and married for love in secret, we ain't having that, and we're gonna take the crown and everything. So she fled and hid in the castle. She wrote to King Henry VIII, but by this time, King Henry VIII had turned into a much darker person. He was grumpier, and he just did not care. And he only in the show he only sent out 6 men to come and retrieve her. She was furious because her brother basically just did not care. They kept the children and everything, the people in Scotland, and this pissed her off. So she goes over to, like, England, but Angus betrayed her. Eventually she goes back and she decides she'll play ball along with whoever's ruling Scotland at that time, right? And so, like, eventually, I think her dowry is something was supposed to be paid off, and Henry did not want to do that. So in the show, she ended up stealing the money. Now, what happened in real life and also in the show is that Angus, the guy who she married, who later betrayed her, she realizes that he had a mistress, and he betrayed her to the Privy Council and stuff like that. Their marriage deteriorated, but she was still forced to marry him. In the show, she tries to get her marriage annulled every way she can, even pretending to be mad and crazy. Oh, this is played by Georgie Hanley, by the way. The reason why I even started watching this show. And so, like, no matter what, her marriage could not get annulled. So she was just forced to stay with him as he's taking, like, everything from her, right? Eventually, she had to flee again, like I said before. And when she came back, she planned a coup. That's what I really liked about her. She was so smart. She planned a coup by ousting the dude who ruled over Scotland, and she took over. And she took over by force by some new guy, I forget his name, who helped her out. That might have became her third husband. I'm not 100% sure. I know she married a third time in real life. But with the help of this dude, she was able to get her son back, she was able to get her kingdom back, and she imprisoned, I believe, Jamie's uncle, or at least the brother of the guy who tried to take her throne the first time and give it to his brother. And that happened in real life. And so at that point in time, she put Jamie in the had him crowned as, like, king, I think, like at age 10 or something like that. And just like I said, in real life, Angus tried to come back to the castle and she fired cannons on him. But she ended up killing 4 people by mistake. And the thing about Meg is that, like I said before, she is so tragic, man, because it's like, she had this kingdom in a country she didn't want to be in, and then next thing you know, like, they turned on her and stuff like that. And it was really hard for her. Like she was a queen and was not allowed to be it. But using her smarts and everything, she found out how to overthrow, like, the person in charge and get her kingdom back. And of course, her son reigned and everything. What's interesting that I did not know is that she is Mary, Queen of Scots' grandmother. Like, holy crap, dude. You know what I'm saying? One thing that shocked the crap out of me in season 2 was the deterioration of the marriage between that of Henry VIII and Catherine. Those two really grew apart. She tried everything she could to make it work and everything, even allowing him to have mistresses, even though she hated seeing that. And he had plenty. And Hastings, Mary Boleyn, Anne Boleyn, somebody else, I forget who. And he mistakenly got one of them pregnant and everything. And what really helped to deteriorate their marriage was that, one, the whole her denying sleeping with Arthur, because he said that was a sin in the eyes of God, that, she married the brother and this and that. And then another thing was she could not give him a male heir. All of her kids would die shortly after birth and stuff. And only Mary was the only one left alive. And Mary was princess and legitimate to the throne, but he did not want that. When he heired Charles out of wedlock, he wanted to put Charles on the throne. And I think the Pope and all of them would not allow it. And when I say he turns angry and volatile towards her, he really does. And he turns angry towards, like, so many other people in his kingdom. One person who hates Catherine to death was Woodsley and everything, who later became like, you know, a person who had so much power that people saw him as like the second king. And what was it? Oh, I forgot to mention Catherine's sister. In real life, yes, her mom did torture her sister because her sister had autism. Her sister was married, became queen, but had no power because Philip had all the power and would cheat on her, but then he later died and all this and that. In the show, her father betrayed them because he was supposed to send his army to help them against France and never did. And the thing about Catherine I always loved is that she was so headstrong and everything. Like, you know, whenever bad things would happen, she would try to make things right. Like when she gave the people of England like coins and stuff like that to make them happy, and also like her, and also like the king or the prince and stuff like that. Because the people of England really did respect and like her and stuff. And you see the tragedy and the turmoil and the distress on her face every time she could not bear like a male heir. And her acting, Charlotte, like Hope acting is so good. She is a strong actress, and I love that and stuff. She really made you feel that she was really Catherine and stuff. And like you always felt her pain in the show. But, you know, after a while, when Henry found out about the whole Arthur thing, after a while in the show, she decided, you know what, I'm just going to leave. I'm going to leave. You have whoever you want. I'll go live in a different castle, blah, 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 and I will always love you and everything. In real life, he kicked her out and stuff. And so, like, she held her head up high and she left her daughter. Now, she did have a strained relationship with her daughter in the show because since she was not a boy and a girl, she just didn't want nothing to do with her, which caused a very big strain on them to where Mary wanted nothing to do with her at first. But Mary Tudor was a very smart girl and everything. She knew a lot of stuff because she was taught very well, whereas Charles was not so bright. And so, like, in real life, when she got kicked out, like I said, the people still worship her and everything. But she told, like, you know, Anne Boleyn in the show, you know, you'll never become queen, even though she did. But, like, you'll never be a true king and queen. And so in real life, they said that even when she lived in exile and everything, she still saw herself as the true queen of, like, England. But sadly, she died later on and stuff. And Henry eventually married, like, you know, a couple of the other women. I think he married eight, no, I don't know, was it 5 times or something like that? And so, like, Anne in real life turned out to, like, betray him, commit treason, and she was executed for that along with Maggie Pole. Maggie here is the one who betrayed her in the show. Something happened in the show. Somebody that Maggie was close with, either like a boyfriend or like a cousin. I think it was her cousin. Her cousin was executed for treason, and so Henry took it out on her and kicked her and her family out, making them poor again, which caused Maggie to turn on Catherine and talked about the whole Arthur thing. Maggie Pole in this series, she's a good character. I didn't understand when I first started watching why did like some of the people didn't like her, and that's because of the whole treason thing and like early seasons and stuff like that. And this Maggie Pole is basically there. She's there for Catherine and she helps her out a lot, especially in season 2. But like I said before, she later betrays her. I believe I read that her and Anne Boleyn tried to commit treason again and she was executed for that. So they finally got Maggie Pole and stuff. And, you know, I still don't understand the thing with her husband at all. Like, I just don't get it. Like, how does his arm be messed up one season and the next season it's not? You know what I'm saying? And her son in the show pretty much betrays her, like becoming like a knight and all this other stuff. And when she had all the stuff ripped out of her home and her daughters just wanted to get married to make sure they're taken care of and stuff like that, like Ursula and stuff. And, you know, so it's like I said before, this show is nothing but tragic, man. Like, I feel so bad for all these queens, except for Lizzie York, because she's the only one who had a pretty good lifestyle. Whereas the other two, you had one that got stripped of the power because, like, her husband died, and the other one, her husband betrayed her with all these other women and kicked her out and everything. And you feel so bad for them because it's like they're queens, you know what I'm saying? But they're not treated as such. And so, like, this series is very interesting, and I do recommend watching it. Just because it's fascinating and stuff. To learn about all this stuff you might never know about in history class because you're not part of that country, or you just never decide to research it and stuff. And still to this day, I don't know which is my favorite because I like them all individually because they all have their flaws, but they all have their moments of greatness as well. Happy Women's History Month, everybody. All right, well, I'll talk to you later. Bye.